9-year-old Nuran, displaced from Aleppo, Syria. 2 years of school lost. Last month, she started going to classes again. She says, "I'm happy that my dad enrolled me back in school. I've been coming every day. I love to learn." Lan is from Vietnam. She attends a daycare center for children with severe disabilities. Before, I didn't dare say anything when they laughed at me, she says. Today, I tell them, I'm a valuable person. I know how to use a computer. I have friends. Don't taunt me anymore. I have a future. Ayatu is a refugee from Mali. She attends school in northern Niger, where early marriage threatens girls' futures. Always on time, ranked third in her class, her fellow classmates elected her as their representative. I'm confident, says Ayatu. God will help me carry on school. I love school. I don't want to drop it. A child of conflict, healing after the trauma of violence. A child with disabilities, learning new skills, growing in confidence. A child fleeing insecurity and hunger, empowered and ambitious. These are the children of our discussion today. They are the foundation of productive societies. Most of all, they are proof that even in the most adverse circumstances, education can be the bridge to a better health, protection, prosperity, and blessed peace, and one of the best investments a nation can make. Nuran, Lan, and Ayatu are the lucky ones. Over 120 million children around the world are shut out of primary and secondary schooling, failed by the Millennium Development Goals that didn't address the needs of children in rural communities or urban slums, those with disabilities, those in conflict zones, the most impoverished, or girls. So as the world gears up to celebrate a quarter century of progress under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, as we accelerate efforts in the last months of the MDGs, and as decision makers finalize the post-2015 agenda, there's never been a better time to rededicate ourselves to educating the world's most disadvantaged children. One of the best ways to do that is to address the finance gap. $42 billion annually. That's all it costs to give all children the education that is their birthright and our responsibility. Yet a $38 billion gap remains, and that gap is widening as traditional donors reduce their funding to basic education. At the same time, the donor landscape is changing. It's becoming more inclusive. Donors from developing countries and emerging economies are beginning to shoulder the financial burden of educating the world's children. Recently, we saw the first African Philanthropy Summit in Addis Ababa, and leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa establish the new development bank with a starting sum of $100 billion. But what of the Arab world? As socioeconomic sands shift north and south, where is it in the new landscape, and what role can it play? Last year, after making a substantial contribution to Egypt, the United Arab Emirates became the most generous donor, with its aid budget reaching 1.25%, more than both Sweden and Norway, which sits at 1.07%. So there's no doubt that Arab donors can address development needs in their region while also playing a more prominent role in addressing those of the global community. But a dearth of information on the diversity of Arab donors, how they engage with the global education challenge, And the nature of their support to education has been a barrier to engaging them. Until now. Recently, I undertook a review of 200 Arab donors who support education. The paper on my findings can be found on the Brookings website. But for now, allow me to share two of the most important conclusions. One, Arab donors' contributions to national, regional, and global education are significant. And two, there are 5 main ways in which the international education community can better engage them. First, there's a strong foundation of charitable giving in the Arab world. Awqaf in Arabic, it was established by the Prophet to strengthen society. Although Awqaf has a religious basis, its motivations are not exclusively religious. A significant portion serves secular purposes. After religious institutions, giving to education is the second most common form of Awqaf. In the past, it's financed scholarships, books, libraries, and teacher salaries, and focused on educating the poor and orphans. Today, this tradition is as strong as ever, which makes Muslim organizations important partners in implementing and funding education in the Arab world and beyond. Second, when it comes to official development assistance, Arab governments have a track record of generosity. Between 2010 and 2012, for example, Arab aid agencies gave around $2 billion to global education. The distribution of that aid matters for our discussion here today. 1/3 went to Asia, another third to sub-Saharan Africa. And it spanned all sectors. Half went to secondary and tertiary education, almost 1/3 to vocational learning, but only 1/4 went to basic education. So the funding is there, and it's generous, but it's not targeting the areas of greatest need. So we must collaborate more closely with Arab donors, strengthen reporting, show results, and align priorities around the post-2015 agenda. Third, royal family initiatives. In the 8 Arab countries with royalty at the helm, typically the largest donor and philanthropic bodies come under royal leadership. Several of these organizations prioritize education, such as Dubai Cares or Educate a Child. But they do so in varying ways. With diverse financial means and operating models, some focus on access and quality locally, and others focus on basic education in Asia and Africa. Inevitably, these bodies work with local governments, NGOs, and international partners. And the visibility of their royal patrons often attracts resources. So as we seek new donors and partners, this broad-based support has huge potential. Fourth, the private sector engagement. As the consequences of the youth skills gap become more apparent and the student age population grows, so too does demand for quality private schooling. Increasingly, the private sector across the Arab world provides it, supports it, and improves it. This is part enlightened self-interest. Corporations need an educated workforce. But it's also profit-driven. The education market in the region is one of the largest in the world. Estimates suggest that private education market could be worth $11 billion by 2020. So the market is there, and the motivation is there. Indeed, all of the private sector can move beyond supporting education through the lens of corporate social responsibility to more comprehensive, meaningful, and true partnerships. Fifth and final is the Arab diaspora, an invaluable part of the new donor landscape. Why? Because owing to the countries in which they live, they're familiar with strong philanthropic and education models, and they understand the needs and nuances of education in the Arab world. The diaspora is especially effective in times of conflict and crisis, rallying resources quickly and investing in the long-term growth of their countries of origin. Earlier this year, for example, the Levant Foundation, founded by a Syrian American, gave the single largest donation of $32 million to the American University of Beirut. So how do we bring more of these donors on board? Well, Arab donors are much the same as donors elsewhere. We must multiply opportunities for Arab donors to meet the global education community, to share, learn, and reflect on challenges. Be more open and reach out to donors to build consensus around common concerns. Work harder to prove the links between financing, better results, and progress. Gone are the days when you can expect a blank check. Arab donors value loyalty. They like to build relationships before they bankroll them. They expect partners to match funds in the spirit of true partnership and shared success. Before I close, let me just say that I know I've spoken a lot about opportunities for progress. I'm aware there are many challenges to overcome before we usher in a golden age of education. But we know the solutions, and we know now of new critical sources of funding. Next, we need more partners. As 2015 draws ever close, we all have a practical and moral obligation to do more for the children left behind. And if we waver in our commitment, let's recall the courage of children like Nuran, Lan, and Ayatu, who every day overcome extraordinary odds to walk to school, to sit in class, and to learn. Let their example inspire us. Thank you.